Well, howdy, friends and neighbors, and welcome to this podcast series. I'm Brian Hilligoss, and honestly, I don't know how many more of these I will be doing. But one thing's for sure, that I've felt for a long time that my talented friend and mentor, musical director, composer, arranger, writer, orchestrator, conductor, jazz guitarist, and Southern son Lloyd Wells needed some recognition and a chance to share the many stories of his life and music, show business, and people along the way. I know there are a lot of folks out there that might be tuning in, if you will, that are familiar with Lloyd, and I know this will be a real treat for you. The musical introduction and underscore you've been listening to is Mr. Wells playing solo guitar from his CD Invitation, and that was a Frank Lesser medley, which has some great Broadway songs on it, from Guys and Dolls and My Time of Day, Luck Be a Lady, and I've Never Been in Love Before. So we'll try to put a link in the comment section or description of this so that you can find this music and listen to more of it without me talking over the top of it. Now I hope you'll bear with me and enjoy, actually, some of the context that I'd like to deliver regarding Mr. Wells and his background, which I think is important. And if you hear him in his Southern brogue in this interview series that I'm going to present for you eventually here, I think with the worldly things he's done and the artistic things that he's done in his lifetime and the folks he's met, married or combined with his Southern brogue accent and his Mississippi upbringing, I think you'll find it fascinating. And for a lot of you folks who already know Lloyd, know that that is true. I got to know Lloyd Wells starting in 1981 when I was hired to be a performer at Opryland USA in Nashville, and we'll get into that a little bit more here in the next few minutes. But I've known this man for nearly 40 years, and it has served me well. From the dirt roads of Laurel, Mississippi, where he was born in 1938, to the Great White Way in New York City, where he worked as an orchestra pit guitarist and utility musician for various on and off Broadway shows, television, and studio work, to what would become his home today, Nashville, Tennessee. Lloyd was accidentally and divinely perfect for the work he has loved so much, and those of us who have reaped the benefits of his experience and his willingness to share and to teach. To give you a short rundown, an idea of who he is and what he's done. Well, now this could seem like a lot, but strap in, get yourself a gin and tonic or a sweet iced tea, or get both. But I really want to share this with you. I think it's wonderful, and it's a bit staggering and impressive and important background as you wind your way through these interviews. Lloyd has performed at the White House on 2 occasions. He's an inductee of the Mississippi Musicians Hall of Fame and a member of the Alumni Hall of Fame of the University of Southern Mississippi. He's conducted the Nashville Symphony on several occasions, including the grand opening of the Tennessee Center for the Performing Arts. And for years, he was chiefly the musical director for Opryland USA, the home of American music in Nashville, Tennessee, actually, and that was for about 23 years, which we'll discover more about later. But while he was there, he wrote and arranged music for 20 different shows, I would guess, and for thousands of performers and musicians that worked for the theme park, and of course the millions of guests that visited there and enjoyed it. And while at Opryland, he wrote music for many television specials in Las Vegas, Riverboat Casinos, Alabama Theater in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, the General Jackson Showboat in Nashville, along with the Ryman Auditorium and the Broadmoor Hotel in Colorado, Country Christmas at the Opryland Hotel for years, shows for Branson, Missouri, and cruise ships. And he was instrumental in the music productions and direction for the World Cup festivities in Chicago in 1995. He also the musical director from the grand opening and for a couple years there at the Fiesta Texas theme park in San Antonio. He's also composed pieces for CMA Awards, 50 golden years with Tennessee Ernie Ford on the Nashville Network. Indeed, he was Ernie's conductor and arranger for a number of years, but we'll clarify that a little bit later. In fact, he may even tell us. And you'll hear more about Tennessee Ernie Ford in one of our episodes that's really just dedicated to him. And Lloyd was contributing arranger for various television specials with Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell Sisters, for CBS and NBC morning shows, The Orange Bowl, and others. Between 1976 and 1988, he enjoyed so many TV appearances with Tennessee Ernie Ford and Porter Wagoner. Speaking of which, I know he's super proud of the work he did as musical director for 2 Nashville network television series, Opryland on Stage, which he arranged and directed 120 hour-long episodes, and the Porter Wagoner at Opryland show. There was also 120 episodes, but only a half hour. But that is a lot of arranging and a lot of music. It truly is staggering. Lloyd and Porter became good friends through this time, and I actually performed on a few of those shows and got to know Porter a good bit and Lloyd better, and enjoyed their mentorship through that time. But I know that they enjoyed working together and had a great mutual respect for each other. Let's take a minute, if you don't mind. Well, I hope you don't mind. Do you really have a choice? To actually hear Porter Wagoner brag on Lloyd, and this is prior to Lloyd playing a guitar solo on one of those shows for Opryland.
My next guest is somebody we would really be lost without on the show. He's our musical director, Lloyd Wells. Not only does he do the arrangement of the music for our show here, but for all of the shows here at Opryland. As I mentioned earlier in the show, Lloyd doesn't stop at just musical arrangements. He's also a wonderful musician. And a lot of people interviewing me, and disc jockeys in different places in the country, ask me if I really have a hero in country music. And this guy I admire, I think, more than anyone, and I'd say he's definitely my hero. He's a musical genius, I actually feel. You're going to have a chance to really hear him play the guitar, and he plays it so great in all different styles, too. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Lloyd Wells.
Now that was an excerpt of Georgia on My Mind, and that was Lloyd Wells playing solo guitar as a reminder, and I'll try to include a link in the description or the comments where you can find that video actually on YouTube. Before his moving to Nashville and working for Opryland, Lloyd spent a long time, almost 10 years in New York City, and worked as a musician for approximately 15 Broadway shows, including Company and Cabaret, and contributed to those original cast albums and actually a documentary for Company with Elaine Stritch, which you can find on YouTube, and I've watched it and found it fascinating. Lloyd is in there for a brief moment, but you can hear him in there with the orchestra. And while he was in New York, he also played on a good amount of television, namely Sesame Street, Electric Company, The Johnny Carson Show, Ed Sullivan, Merv Griffin, and Skitch Henderson. To name a few, Lloyd has also toured and played headline shows as a guitarist with greats such as, well, of course, Ernie Ford, but also Peggy Lee, Jane Russell, Billy Vaughn, Guy Mitchell, Rosemary Clooney, and others. Lloyd has also spent a good amount of time working with Brenda Lee on, I think, some of her stage shows and conducted orchestras for her. He also played guitar on a good bit of movie and television soundtracks, including those for Angela Lansbury, Dick Cavett, Lucille Ball, and Ronnie Milsap. By the way, this is a lot of name dropping, I realize, but I find it fascinating. But it reminds me of a personal story. Vince Gill once told me that it was bad form to name drop. Here, do you need me to repeat that? Maybe not. Seriously, this man, Lloyd Wells, has witnessed a lot of greatness in the world of show business, and through all this, he's managed to stay married for 50-something years. I mean, it may be even 60 by now. But wow, I have no idea how this man has found time to do all of this that I just went through and all of the yard work that his wife Louise has supervised. And it's, yeah, almost every time I call Lloyd, what are you doing? Well, Louise has me working on the deck or the yard. And honestly, friends and neighbors, I believe that Lloyd's real passion really isn't music. It is yard work at his house there in West Nashville where he raised his 2 children. And on top of all of this, Lloyd is still to this day a dedicated guitarist and practices at least once a day, oftentimes twice, and this is for as long as he can remember. He is a forever student of the instrument and fascinated by its troublesome, infinite possibilities. And I have spent a lot of time with guitar in my life, and in my more recent years have spent more time learning more about guitar. And the more you learn, the more you realize that how difficult it really is. It's the easiest instrument I ever learned to play, but the hardest one to ever be good at. In one of our episodes, Lloyd was very passionate about sharing his thoughts about that instrument. So look for that and hope you enjoy it. Now, Lloyd may not boast this for himself, but for me and for the folks who spent time with him know him as an Americana storyteller. He's a historian, an overall walking musical encyclopedia. Very humble man, and if cornered, he might say, Brian, I just pay attention and I remember, and I've been blessed and lucky. And if he were to say that, and this is my impression of Lloyd Wells, which many folks have impersonated him over the years. Some even a man named Randy Moore used to work at Opryland, and I believe he got Lloyd's wife, Louise, on the telephone one day and talked to her for 15 minutes or so, and she thought it was Lloyd the entire time. But anyway, Lloyd would just say, Brian, I pay attention and I remember, and I have been blessed and I've been lucky. So I don't know if that was any good or not, but I enjoy doing it. So back in 2019, I had the great privilege to sit down and interview Mr. Wells at his daughter's house in West Nashville. And it's a home once owned by his dear, dear friend, and a friend to many, and some of you folks who may be listening, Tom McBride, who is no longer with us. I wanted to capture just a hint of the stories and the unique wisdom that Lloyd has shared with me throughout the 40 years that I've known him and continues to share. I felt his knowledge and observations were important, and I felt like they needed to be documented in some way. Now, I might add that our relationship is not particularly selective or any more special than what he shares with others he comes in contact with, or he's mentored, or he's touched through the years. He has that ability to make you feel special no matter who you are. And Lloyd listens, and he cares. Many of my colleagues and friends from show business around Nashville know him through his role there at Opryland. And for those of you who don't know, just a little bit of background here. For 25 years, 1972 to 1997, Opryland USA was America's only show park or theme park that recalled and captured the music of America and played it back to its 2.5 million guests per year in a way that was warm, nostalgic, relevant, artistic, fun, and thanks to Lloyd Wells and his passion and talents, well, the experience was musical. Being musical director, orchestrator, writer, arranger, conductor, and sometimes he had to play the heavy, but they were all part of his job there. He once told me a story about walking through Opryland, the park as we called it. He said he'd been walking through the park and it was one of those hot days and probably 10 or 15,000 visitors were in the park, and he was just going to do a walkthrough and make sure everything was running well and see how things were going. And he recalled standing outside the Showboat Theater and he happened to be standing by the little marquee where all the cast names and were there, along with the stage managers and the other staff that had that contributed to the show. And he heard a woman standing next to him, and she was waiting to get into the show, and he was standing right there, and he started eavesdropping, and he heard her say out loud as she was reading the marquee, "Lloyd Wells, musical director. I've seen his name on almost every one of these today. He must be a busy man." Well, Lloyd is a busy man. Today he stays busy with his granddaughter Ella, and with yard work, and with playing the guitar. But no telling the number of performers and musicians who started or perhaps ended their careers at Opryland. They credited Lloyd for bringing them to Nashville and giving them their first real chance at fulfilling their dreams. And yes, of course, there were a cast of talented folks, many, and generous folks who were on staff at Opryland Entertainment who were also responsible for making this success possible. But this podcast isn't about them, nor is it about Opryland USA. It's about a humble and talented man who would rather have a bowl of his mama's collard greens than accolades. But I felt it important to set this up with some sort of context. And if you don't know, or you do know Lloyd Wells, I know that this will all be interesting to you. So without further ado, and to name drop, as comedian Robert Klein has said, what is ado and why can't we have any further of it? Ladies and gentlemen, friends and neighbors, welcome Lloyd Wells. Lloyd, right away, let's tell folks what Opryland USA was.
Opryland was a show park, which a lot of people didn't term it that, but that's what it was. It was a show park. Every other park that I've ever been in has been a ride-oriented park with some shows, varying degrees of shows and varying quantities of shows. But Opryland, as you well know, had, I've forgotten what the PR number was for all the shows that we had, but they were involved things. And during my tenure out there, we flew as a creative production group to almost every major park in the nation, and saw varying shows. And nothing ever approached what we had at Opryland in terms of it being live entertainment, live singers, live musicians. We've talked about at times that when the park was open full-time, with both casts going full-time every day, we worked more musicians in that park at one time than any place on the planet. We had like 140 people, musicians, drawing checks every week. Nothing like it. Didn't happen at Disney World, didn't happen at Disneyland, none of the Six Flags over Utah, none of that, it just didn't happen. But it did at Opryland. And the quality was up equal to the quantity.
Well, I will tell you that I auditioned the first time when I was 15 years old at North Carolina School of the Arts and almost got hired, but I was too young. And then once I started getting some knowledge under my belt in college and working, I spent about 3 years clawing my way back to finally getting hired. It took a while.
I know a lot of people like that, a lot of kids, man.
I came real close.
Yes, sir.
Well, after singing show tunes 2 or 3 years, thinking that would get me hired, I finally went back to singing Rocky Top and yodeling, and then that's what got me hired.
Got you.
Well, I will say that I think I read or heard that at one time Opryland had the largest talent pool in the world.
Yeah.
Do you believe that?
Yeah. Sight unseen, I would agree. I don't know anything. Something like that might possibly have happened in California, in Hollywood, at some particular point, but not on a yearly thing. It just didn't happen. It's hard to explain the quantity and the quality of that park. I don't know of anything that ever approached it. Considering all the outside stuff that we did outside, the conventions, the other parks that we mounted shows for, my God, they're all over the place, And big time convention things in a hotel, all that stuff. Man, there was nothing like it.
You told me once that there were 140 musicians on staff. Was that singers and dancers, or?
No, I'm talking about pickers, man. Horn players.
Wow, that's nuts.
Well, think about if you just take a minute and start counting beans. Think about what the work dues from all that went into the local union here were every week.
Well, I never really understood why the union wasn't more involved in a positive way for what we were doing out there. And I don't know, it just seemed like we weren't really taken seriously or something.
Yeah, it's probably a mixture of everything that you can think about, but I do agree with you. It is approaching the same aura that surrounded Red Foley.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about because we've spoken about this before, and I want to save it though. Let's go back to we'll come back to it. But what about Opryland? How did you get there, and how did that all happen?
We came through here just on vacation, going back down to Mississippi when the kids were young. In '72 we came, and we saw all the things in town, and somebody said, well, there's a theme park out by the river out there, go take your kids out there. So we went out there. They rode the log ride and all that kind of thing. And we saw I think part of that My Country show that was there, and I Hear America Singing. And didn't think any more about that. We went on home, and I believe driving back to New York, we just decided we would move to Nashville. I'll never do that again. That's the last time. But we went back up, put the house on the market, got in touch with some real estate folks down here and found a house. I canceled all my gigs. I canceled a Broadway show, 2 gentlemen of Verona, to move to Nashville. Didn't know anybody down here. Did not have a job. The only person I knew about, I called Monday and asked him if he knew. Called him, and he says, I kind of know Harold Bradley there in Nashville. You might give him a call. And so Harold was the only person I called when I got to town. And he let me come hang out around with him a little bit. He located me some club dates, kind of introduced me down to the union and all. And when I did go down and join the union, I didn't transfer, I just joined the union in Nashville. And Harold was there that day, and it was a big union meeting. And he said, I'd like to introduce Lloyd Wells. He comes to us from New York, from the New York local. But he had the good sense to be born in Mississippi, and it was tickled me. That got me started.
And I don't mean to be ignorant here, but you weren't really a country guitar picker, were you?
No, I wasn't, but I had some country roots, and I still got them, man. You know how much I love it, the classical stuff, man, the classic stuff, rather. I grew up listening to Red Foley and Acuff and Bill Monroe and God knows who else that I can't even think of.
What was your first instrument?
Mandolin.
Mandolin. How did that happen?
Daddy had a little bit. Handed it to me one day and says, "Here, learn this, boy." He played a little mandolin, little tenor banjo. Then he got me a guitar. There were no teachers down there anywhere, and he didn't know but 3 or 4 chords.
About how old were you when you started that?
Probably 9 or 10, somewhere along there.
Wow. So when you got to Nashville, how long was it before you started playing at Opryland?
Just a few months. We had not really finished unpacking, and I told you, Jay Collins said they got that Dixieland band, so I went out and auditioned for that. Right. Got started.
And where did you go from there?
I played the 75 Country Music USA, the 1975 season. Mm-hmm. And then I got music director, a tentative job then for a year, and then from then on that was it.
Was Tom McBride in that band in 75?
He was.
Wow.
He was playing piano.
Miss Tom.
I miss Tom too. Everybody does. Everybody knew him.
Everybody. He left a big hole.
We're sitting in his home right here, I told you this.
That's right. That's right. Your daughter lives here in this house now. And so how did you become the musical director out there? Did George Mabry approach you, or how did that happen?
Most of it was through Mabry. There was Barry McDonald had done some of the arranging, and Johnny Duke, who used to teach down there at MTSU or whatever, had done some. He did the original arrangements for "I Hear America Singing," I think, and the position just came available. Barry couldn't take it on because he had so much other stuff to do, and it just became available. And Mabry suggested me, and they took his word for it, so I got it. And it was a kind of a blind shot in the dark for him because I had only done one or two arrangements for him, but he went out on a limb.
And to that, I would say bless his heart for doing that. It was a great move for you, and it was a good move for all of us who got to work with you. Well, friends and neighbors, I'm going to conclude this episode, and just know that there are others. You can find those wherever you found this one, and we'll continue talking to Lloyd about his time at Opryland in Nashville and New York City and Mississippi and everywhere else he's been, and the folks he's met along the way, and maybe we'll pick up a little Southern wisdom from him here and there. So hope you guys you're done with your gin and tonic or your sweet iced tea, and maybe you've moved on to something else by now. But nonetheless, thank you for joining us. And we're going to close now with one of my favorite recordings. It's When You Wish Upon a Star. And I really enjoy this recording. And listen closely to the arrangement, not just the guitar playing. That's mighty fine. But as the arrangement's going through, there's a lot of nuances there that are uniquely Lloyd Wells. And I can hear the combo or the strings and the horns playing along with him on this and how he thinks. It's just beautiful. I'm Brian Hilligoss, and thank you for joining me. Don't forget to look in the description or the comments section of this so you can find out where to listen to more. Thank you, and here is Lloyd with When You Wish Upon a Star.